All right, well, I just want to welcome everyone to our first Data Analytics SIG webinar and also introduce Dr. Alex Pelaez. Alex and I have known each other many years, maybe 15 years, Alex. I'm
Oh, easily.
in the industry. He is currently a professor at Hofstra University, as well as the CEO of 5E Analytics. Anyway, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Alex Pelaez, chair of our Data Analytics SIG, who will be speaking on how AI will transform New York City and Long Island post-COVID-19. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. All right, welcome everybody to this obviously pertinent subject. First I want to actually, maybe they're not here, but I do want to recognize all the first responders, doctors, nurses, and all the people who are on the front lines, basically trying to help us keep safe, and everybody involved in doing that. And I think it's important to recognize them. The purpose for this presentation is to discuss how society will probably change, most likely change. And I'm not giving an absolute, but there are a lot of signs that that's the case. Government is going to demand changes, companies will demand changes, and society and communities will demand changes as well. The idea then is, how will AI actually help that transformation? Where do we go from here? Or where are we going to go? So as part of this discussion, we're going to talk about, first of all, reopening the economy. It's really important to understand how that's going to happen. Everybody talks about this data-driven approach. And that's the fundamental concept of artificial intelligence, is everything is based on data. It's also important to talk about the current state of modeling and where that's going to lead to these industry challenges. Specifically here in New York City, Long Island, because we do have certain industries that we are very focused on, and those industries are going to radically change. What's also more important is New York, this metropolitan region, was one of the first areas, or it was the area that was hit the hardest across the nation, which means we will be the epicenter of all change. And people will be looking at what we do and how we respond to inform how they're going to respond. So that's going to create all sorts of challenges for the industry. And finally here, we're going to talk about where the specific opportunities are in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how that affects our local industry, specifically around areas of finance, healthcare, retail, manufacturing as well. So let's talk about the current situation. Obviously, since March 16th, we've had a tremendous strain on the economy. It was projected that unemployment was going to reach anywhere from 15 to 30%, with 16 million current unemployed. Obviously, the new numbers came out today. We have 20+ million unemployed and an unemployment rate of 14%. That will still go up. The question of whether or not you have 47 million unemployed by the end of the summer or by summer is up in the air, how quickly our rebound is. But it's obviously hurt the local GDP as well as obviously the global GDP. And it leads to uncertainty, because part of that uncertainty is who opens, where do they open? What are we going to be allowed to do? If you have 25% of the people who can go into a restaurant, some of those restaurants are not going to survive. How do we adapt to this new reality of what we're seeing? Long Island is a very, very tight area. We have a large population in a very tight area, which is unfortunately a very big or good situation for a virus to expand. So we're going to be constantly trying to figure out, how do we balance our own economy, as well as how do we balance this notion of trying to keep everybody safe. So in order to monitor the current situation, we need the data to understand what's going on. We have to monitor the virus infections. We have to identify areas of reinfection. We have to figure out which businesses can open and how they will open. And then when we reopen, we need to monitor, identify, isolate, and all of the machine learning algorithms, prediction models, data collection, all of that goes into every single one of these situations. So let's kind of take a look at what that's going to mean. So we've been modeling the cases in New York and Long Island, as well as other areas. I was interviewed by the Norfolk, Virginia news station about whether or not Hampton Roads, the 7 counties in the eastern part of Virginia, northeastern part of North Carolina could open. And we went through some of these items for them. And it's the same thing here. When we look at positive cases, obviously we can see there are a tremendous number of positive cases. And some of this may have to do with just increased testing. Some of it has to do with infections. We saw the governor yesterday say that in New York City, 20% of the people may have actually had the virus already based on their testing. 11 or 12% in New York and another 11% in Westchester. So you're talking about an infection rate already of 15 to 20%. One of the keys is that we need to collect more data. Now, we've been collecting data from a number of sources and storing them and providing this to some of our clients so they can see where areas might open. And we do this by county level. And the key is that the regions and sub-regions have to be analyzed because there's no one size fits all. The New York City, Nassau County, Suffolk area is very tightly together, but I'm going to show you a chart in a few seconds that will indicate where some of the other problems lie. So this is a chart of the case increases. We can see that the increase in number of cases has gone down. We're not seeing the blow up that we saw up to about April 15th. We're seeing all of the right trends happening. And that's important because as your organization decides when they're going to open up or how they're going to open up, these types of numbers need to be understood because we want to look and see, is it trending back upward or is it continually trending downward? And what does this mean in terms of my customers coming in, let's say to Roosevelt Field Mall, or let's say to the Walt Whitman Mall or something like that? Because this will affect foot traffic and it will affect employment and your employees coming to your office. The mortality rates are another one that we look at because what this does is this contributes to fear. And we found that the largest element of fear is in this area because there has been so much, death with respect to this crisis, but a lot of it has been here. And so it creates that fear. People don't want to go out. People don't want to engage. That's going to affect a lot of different things from people wanting to come to your office for employment or actually just interacting with you. So how is this reopening going to occur? And this has been said, we identified this weeks ago. The governors have said this as well. Everything is going to be geographically, regional, community-based. Some level of not statewide, but areas of a state, including things like certain types of industries and businesses that may not require so much interaction. This is one of the reasons why the gym memberships, the restaurants are going to have a very big problem because of the required connectivity of those individuals, it's going to run into a problem. So the businesses have to align their recovery strategy to this model. Where can they open up or what changes do they need to make to allow these customers to come in? You can only do that if you're collecting the data on who's coming in, if you're collecting the data on the current crisis in terms of the number of infections, is it going up, is it going down? But also to use that information to project back to your customers that you are sensitive and figuring out in a data-driven way how your interaction with them will affect their personal livelihood. So this turns out to be this community by community type of opening. What's fascinating about it is that when we looked in the next slide, you'll see that one of the things that we focused on was from a Long Island perspective, and we've kind of focused on Nassau County, and I'll show you how we got there, where these infection rates started to trend, how they trend, and what does that mean? Because this will then go in reverse to say, how will we open parts of Nassau County or parts of Suffolk County? Is there a risk for more hotspots? Where would they be? Can we predict where they're going to be? So in general, not just for New York State or for Long Island specifically, how will you open up? You're going to see smaller cities and areas in smaller, less populous states open up. Then you'll see medium cities in smaller states open up. You will see larger cities in these smaller or medium-sized states open up, and then larger, more broader populous areas will open up last. The metropolitan regions will be the last to open up, and that is because of the concentration of the cases, as well as the concentration of the population itself, the density, which will allow the virus to move, to expand. Now, we've actually said that New York is probably going to be the last to completely open, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is because of the large number of cases. But I'm going to show you in 2 slides why we think it's going to be one major issue that needs to be resolved. This is what the map looks like for the United States. We can see this was as of yesterday. So we took this information. You can see the very populous states are having a problem in terms of the total number of cases, in terms of the total infections, of hospitalizations, intubations, and so forth. And you can use this data to predict what's actually going to happen and where. Where could you travel? For a Long Island business, this is important because if I'm literally shipping product or trying to get product into certain areas, I know which areas I'm going to have a pretty easy time to actually get that product to. But I have to worry about my own distribution system here in New York. And so we may work with other distribution areas around the country so that I can get my product out to other customers. So figuring out the target areas are important because it's based on the infection rates as well as based on the hospitalization and intubation. Because remember, the government's closed down areas because they were afraid it was going to overrun the hospitals. So that becomes your critical identifier. This is what New York looked like, and I specifically chose Nassau County. So what happens here is this. In New York, we could see that the upper regions do not have that many cases reported. The majority of the cases are in this downstate region. But if you look at the Nassau County map, and this was a little bit more prevalent about 2 weeks ago, the middle track over here between Elmont, Franklin Square, West Hempstead, Hempstead, Uniondale, East Meadow, Levittown, and Hicksville, plus areas of Freeport and South Hempstead, Freeport and Roosevelt. The challenge with this is why did it occur across this swath? And the primary reason, and you got to be a Long Island native to really know this, this area here in the middle is Hempstead Turnpike. And this is where the buses run. The major bus lines run across this area. And so when you expand that further and you say, well, the next highest area seems to be along the South Shore line too. Merrick, Belmore, Wantagh, Rockville Center, Baldwin, Freeport, Merrick, Belmore, Wantagh, Seaford, and you get the idea. We know that the mass transit, even looking at New York City data, seem to have an exponential effect on spreading the virus. And what that does is that talks to the density. It talks to how we operate, because now if that's true, then what ends up happening is we need to have a plan for how are we going to get our workers back to where they need to be? Or will there be such a transformation that they won't be going back? We're starting to see more news articles of people deciding they no longer want to live in New York City. They want to go to the Hudson Valley. They want to go further. They're going to look for that separation. They're going to look to move further out. If they do, so too will businesses. Beyond just normal work from home, this type of chart, if this holds out and it's mass transit that's the issue, it's going to have a large effect on the behavior of folks who will either not want to go work, they're going to want to change their times of when they go in, not use the public transportation, or do something else entirely. So what role is AI going to play? Well, they can, for immediate concern right now for the COVID crisis, it's going to pinpoint areas that can open up and when. So it will basically look at, from a density factor, what's the probability of you actually getting the virus in a particular area? Now, I've been told by some people, well, people could move from one place to another and they could infect a group. And the answer is yes, they can. But remember, large infections will require a larger density. So even if I went to a smaller area, the number of people that, if I was asymptomatic, the number of people that I would actually infect would be smaller because those folks are much more dispersed, more sparse, less interaction. So that actually bodes well a little bit for Suffolk County, especially for certain areas of Suffolk County that are a little bit more widespread, and they won't have as much to fear. Northern Nassau County, the same thing. But the middle of Nassau County, Queens, Brooklyn, it starts to change. What we also want to do, and this is important, is if you're an organization or a company, you want to monitor the restart of the economic activity because these things occur in waves. So think of an earthquake wave. So the epicenter, let's say, as an example, is New York, and boom, it goes all the way out towards Long Island. Now, the actual restart of economic activity will not start from New York and work outward. It will actually work back inward. Even though someone like Suffolk County is experiencing a little bit higher peaks right now in parts of Nassau as well, the problem is the density level is much lower than it is in New York City. So the number of cases will actually reduce, and they'll reduce faster than they would in a very dense population. AI and ML algorithms from different areas, especially folks at Northwell who are working with the state, would actually be able to figure out which areas could open up and how could they open up and what the effect is going to be, knowing that some level of infection is going to happen. The other thing is to identify changes in behavior. So as people start coming back into the economy and start buying, do they decide to stay home? So you can model like your sales, if we use a retail environment, you can model your sales that as you open up, what is that having an effect? What are people buying? What are they looking for? And how does that translate into long-term consumer behavior? Because ultimately you want to know, what is this going to end up affecting later on 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and how do I need to adapt? One of the biggest challenges that we have, and this is sometimes it's healthy, but it is problematic, is this skepticism of models. This model was wrong. This model was wrong. And so people are making decisions based on different models, but they're incorrect. Now the truth is they're not incorrect. They're just based on faulty data that comes in. The more data we get in, the more models we have, the better those models will be. What's important, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, is the importance of sharing of data. And so this cooperation, this data cooperation will become critical, not just within a particular industry, but across industries. We've always talked about sharing healthcare data for the patient. Now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to share data across industries as well, because they can use that data to understand what's happening. We had an example where we had a conversation with WWE, and they had asked us, how can they figure out where the economy is opening up or where they can, get a better understanding? And one of the things that we told them was, we said, look at shortages. Look at shortages that are occurring. If you're seeing delivery of items and a leveling off of shortages of staple products like water and meat and so forth, then you'll know that economic engine is starting to reach back to equilibrium. And those are going to be the first areas that you can go back to. So this skepticism is good, but it is problematic because sometimes it gets applied to every model. Now, we talked about New York City a little bit, Long Island. Let's get a little bit more specific. So every single industry is going to have a major change. Finance, which is our biggest, the biggest industry in this region, is going to take a very big hit. Healthcare is going to radically change, and we'll talk about some specific things. Professional and technical services as well will have an issue, and retail, manufacturing, and education. So there's a question out there, is AI going to be used in opening up Long Island and New York City? Is the government using this? The answer is yes. There are a couple of companies that are working. Unfortunately, we're not one of them. We'd love to be. But there are a couple of companies that are working with the state and the city government. Most of this is driven by the state to determine how they can open up. But it is all based on the data that they get. And that's one of the reasons why you're seeing a lot more testing and antibody testing, because they need to know how prevalent this virus is and when they can get to this level of the herd immunity, and then understand what they need in terms of vaccines as well as treatments. And all of those have to be taken into consideration. But the AI that's being used is to predict when as parts open up, how many people begin interacting with each other, what's that going to do for the overall infection rate, and what that means for hospitalizations. Because again, that's the key that the government is looking for. So post-COVID-19, AI is going to affect us in a number of ways. From social distancing, which will be a staple of what we do from this point forward, to changing our work environment, because we have a very physical work environment, people are connected to each other, we need to figure out how we're going to operate. To new opportunities, new companies will emerge to try and figure out a way to engage customers. As well as you're going to see other companies use their artificial intelligence ML algorithms to actually become disruptors in an existing area. Some of the older type of companies will just run into a problem and they won't be able to adapt very well. These AI algorithms will help overcome challenges like enabling you to do rapid response. Hey, we're seeing a hotspot. What can we do? What do we need to do? Predict where those hotspots will occur. Predict our customer behavior. Predict what they're going to buy. It will also help us manage our supply chain. This has been one of the critical things. We're noticing a few issues with our national supply chain. And how do we get that supply chain better? Some of the interesting things that Long Island can do is look to try and absorb some of those global production, bring them back to Long Island. One of the things that we had a discussion with another group who interviewed me was Puerto Rico, as an example, would be an amazing place to bring back the pharmaceuticals because it has the infrastructure there. We historically have had certain technical infrastructure here. We've got structure for healthcare. We've got structure for finance. There is no reason why Long Island could not be or become a global leader in that area once again, if we do it right. Artificial intelligence will also help us build simulations. And one of the things that we've advocated for years with companies is build simulations to predict what will happen, to try and identify how customers' behaviors will change, what they will do, what won't they do. So let's talk a little bit about the social distancing. This is going to cause a lot of retailers. If you think about like Roosevelt Field, how do you manage social distancing when you have an economy open, right? We're seeing the dots on the floors, like if you've gone to a supermarket or if you've gone to a CVS or a Walgreens, you can see these dots on the floor and people are, keeping their distance. But when you have large queues at a cash register, now they're going up the aisles. This is going to require changes in the actual displays. How do I move things? Where do they need to go so I can create this distance and make my customers feel comfortable? Because if they're not comfortable with your social distancing policy, they're not going to be comfortable coming to your stores. Now, this is a very good advantage for some smaller stores who don't have the large set of people coming in. So smaller retailers and smaller organizations might actually benefit from this by engaging those types of customers saying, we don't have a lot of people in our store, you're safe. Some customers will want this voluntary social distancing. They will mandate it and do it themselves. They will basically change where they go. I have personally done it myself. Instead of going to a major supermarket, I've gone to the smaller supermarket that's a little bit out of the way because it is less crowded, and I've changed my buying habits because of it. Not because of any super fear, but because I didn't want to be around anybody. Customer demands for different services. Folks will demand different services. We're seeing the Instacart, we're seeing the Grubhub. The gig economy, which is kind of almost collapsed, will probably be resurgent in the coming months because there will still be a demand as people have no longer gone out and they started using them. You've had many people who were reluctant to try Instacart or reluctant to try Grubhub, and now they had no choice. That stays with them. So that presents a great opportunity. We have so many restaurants and so many different stores on Long Island that it would make a lot of sense for those companies to embrace it because they can get the food, they can keep their businesses running, and the gig economy will enable them to charge a premium for some of this. So we also will have algorithms to help manage traffic into the stores. So you're going to see a lot of work with mobile apps to help manage traffic coming into the stores. We want to basically increase the connection with our customers through these mobile apps. What if customers, let's say at Roosevelt Field, started pushing and saying, hey, we're 80% crowded, we're 90% crowded, or we're 50% crowded. There are a few folks in these stores and we can monitor where people go. Does everybody need to be tracked? No, but we can do estimates based on the folks who allow us to track them, which is also a scary thing to know that you can be tracked at every place at Roosevelt Field. Places like Freeport, where you have a nautical mile for restaurants. The Freeport Chamber of Commerce can get together and say, hey, we're going to put something together so that we can tell everybody, hey, we're not fully stacked. We only have a 50%. There's plenty of open seats, and we're managing this threshold quite easily. And we can give you reservations at certain areas, as opposed to you're calling each individual one to try and get a reservation because you want to go back onto the store or to the restaurant. The other way is enhanced delivery mechanisms. We're seeing a lot of this in news reports where even smaller companies are using drones to deliver product. Automated deliveries, the self-driving concept will probably explode. Again, with the technical resources that we have available on Long Island, there is no reason why we couldn't become the leader, that second Silicon Valley or the Long Island Valley, right? Where we basically know what to do because we don't have a choice. We have to make this work. And finally, we can use the AI algorithms to do replenishment. It's going to get, we're using IoT, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, where you use the Internet of Things with customers so that you can replenish their product at a very even clip. What that would do is that would also prevent shortages. That would prevent, this supply chain problem that we found because we're still using an antiquated type of technology. The work environment is the one that's going to change. We have a tremendous number of office buildings here in New York City and obviously on Long Island. What's going to happen is as people come in to that or want to come back into their office, companies are going to face the challenge of what data they should collect and how. Is it enough to basically have them certify that they don't have a fever, that they don't have a cough, and that they weren't tested positive for COVID? What privacy issues are going to be there? How do we store that data? Okay, where is that data going to be stored, and could it be used against me as an employee? We're going to predict and forecast who should stay home and alter work schedules. We can create these alternating work schedules to say, hey, these folks should stay because they've been, they're along that Hempstead Turnpike line, or they travel in by railroad. Do organizations know how their employees come to work? May not have mattered before, but it probably matters more now. And we want to basically forecast, hey, if there is an outbreak, how is that going to affect our other employees? Managing workflow and foot traffic, we can use AI algorithms to help us manage where our employees go within a warehouse. Give us the optimal route and help understand how many times people connected with each other within 6 feet. And at some point, it won't matter because we won't have to worry about it. But then what about the next illness that comes out? Do we need to worry about that? As well as then safeguard the inventory, because now that you have social distancing, we'll talk a little bit about increased levels of fraud as well that will occur. The other key thing about the work environment before I move is that some companies will now decide, as we talked about, some employees will want to move to the Hudson Valley, or they're going to want to move further out, let's say to Suffolk County. As a company, do I put my resources further out? Instead of saying work from home, we're going to create more satellite offices. The big building, or the incubator, as it might be called, may end up being a little bit of thing of the past. Whereas I want satellite offices in a bunch of different areas that are managed differently so that I can manage these, any outbreaks that may occur. Now, do I think that they're going to totally go away? No, but do I think companies will rethink what position they want in terms of corporate real estate? 100%. And that will be a huge challenge for some of the finance companies and real estate companies moving forward, especially in this region. So some of the other challenges that can be overcome with new opportunities, again, I'll go through these a little bit quickly. From customer behavior, we use these AI algorithms to identify our purchasing habits. How will they purchase? Where do they purchase? When do they purchase? We're going to create more contactless purchasing options. Now, those will occur either with the credit cards where I don't have to press any keys, or it's already connected to my phone and I'll pay directly from my phone so no one's touching my phone. That contactless type of environment is a real big change for everything. Do we use cash? Do we not use cash? We're using credit cards more now. It's only, I think, 10 or 15% are cash transactions. But how does that affect the local stores? How does it affect your local pizzeria that relies on cash, or your delis, or any of these other small outfits that lose a percentage every time a credit card transaction is used? Payments will change completely. You might see more subscription type payments, right? You might see more, hey, you can pick up the stuff. I already have your account. I never have to even get your information. I just charge it and you can accept it on the phone using other payment systems. The new acquisitions is also interesting because customers will gravitate towards safer businesses. And they're going to define that safety in many different ways. From, are you doing the right thing as a company, as a retail store, as an outlet? Are you too crowded? I just don't want to be there. Or even, I'm just going to go there because it's not crowded. It may be a very tight space, but nobody goes there, so I'm going to go there and engage there as well. The other way AI can work is it can identify sentiment. So you can use something called natural language processing to identify the sentiment of folks, either through their Twitter feeds or through Facebook, if you're collecting that information, or through any other comments that may occur. You allow yourself to pull that information in and watch the sentiment. Is fear increasing? Is safety increasing? And that might give you some additional insight into how and why your customers are changing their behavior. We'll see an increase in disruptors, especially around automated delivery systems, right? Things that will deliver the product, because it's that whole contactless type of environment. Enhanced mobile application use as well is critical. So companies will have to do more of using the mobile apps. And this will occur inside of a corporation as well who's doing HR stuff. I don't want to go onto my computer. How will this affect other things like the use of your own computer as opposed to using a generic computer? How does it affect shared resources? All of that will have an impact. We'll use the AI algorithms to help customers find products so that they don't have to spend as much time in the store if they don't want. They can actually get the product or have it ready for them. And that will change that interaction because you're going to lose some of that some of the time that they spend going around the store and possibly picking something up. We'll have the machine learning for the faster supply chain. We'll increase our cloud-based data solutions as well. These won't be stored locally, they will be in the cloud. But the final piece for a disruptor are the companies that will put together this data cooperation, both from a healthcare perspective and beyond. Sharing information about what the economy is doing. We are seeing this a few years ago. We started seeing this with BMW, Mercedes, Audi. All of them got together to share driving data so they could understand how their customers were behaving. But that shared data would go back to the other cars to tell them about traffic, to tell them about weather, to tell them about certain road conditions. We can see the same thing here. So organizations must become more data-centric. So this is 100% true. We know that we've got to be data-centric. It's going to be even more now. And the reason it is because we need to stay in connection with our customers. The predictive models that we developed are part of risk mitigation strategies, as well as in search of new opportunities. And that's what we're looking for. So let's take a look at some specific solutions in a couple of areas. I didn't include education, but I'll talk about education as well because I think it's important here to match up with the New York State guidelines there. So in finance, the commercial real estate changing work patterns, identifying areas for best investments. Where is going to be the area for the best investment? Is that shift, that paradigm shift occurring? Should we be spending or investing more money in these smaller buildings? Should we focus on these more satellite offices in different areas? Going to affect the commercial real estate market tremendously. In other areas, fraud detection algorithms, because the less contact you have with someone invites more fraud. So the fraud detection algorithms need to get more adapted to this type of contactless type of interaction. The economic challenges, obviously, possible increase in bankruptcy and losses. We know that Nassau County is basically creating some models to understand what this is going to do to the economy, where those bankruptcies are going to occur, and how to revitalize certain areas. In the retail banking, again, just like a regular retail outlet, new procedures and operations for contactless banking, chatbots, process automation. But think about the ATM. You're going to an ATM that has been shared, a kiosk that has been shared with other folks. How can I do this where I do not have to touch anything? How can I interact with my bank where I don't have to touch anything? Where I don't have to worry about carrying a sanitizer if I forgot it? Or I don't have to worry about gloves? There are going to be some very, very specific challenges here in retail banking specifically for that. Data analysis. One of the key things that we're telling folks is look at the unstructured data that you have available. look at the news reports, look at your Twitter feeds, look at your Facebook feeds, everything that you can get. Pull that data in so that you can analyze things from sentiments to behaviors to what people are looking for, and allow these AI algorithms to basically pull and cull out some of those items for you, especially in the finance area. In healthcare, this is something that's been around, but now it's going to take even more prevalence, which is the epidemic response or pandemic response. You're going to see companies develop better ways of collecting the data and produce these data model, advanced data models for the virus. There's a company in Long Island and Farmingdale, Brandon Systems. They're building a kind of like a pandemic or a crisis management system to collect this data so that they can provide it for counties and companies and so forth. And they're working on the security, HIPAA compliance and so forth. But it's a critical type of application that some of these folks will need in order to collect that data so they know what to do with their employees or what to do with their customers. Telehealth has been around for a while, but now that people have had no choice but to use it, now they're going to become even more comfortable. This is going to include wearable health technologies. We think Long Island could be an absolute hub for this. Because of the large healthcare presence that we have, and because of the technological presence that we have, the two could work together to develop new wearable health technologies, bring that technology to a home, and allow doctors to interact more so that they're using their time only on folks who will actually need to come in and need to be seen, whereas everything else can be monitored. This will also help increase the actual utilization of folks who don't want to leave their home to go to the doctor, who don't feel that they should, and who are scared to. And it will also allow them to possibly get the care that they need. So there are a lot of benefits, including possibly reduced costs. We think that what's going to happen is a lot of the health systems and providers, because of this situation, they had to work together much more closely. So we think that's going to continue. That data interconnection has to continue at a grander scale, not just on individual cases and what they have to transfer a hospital patient's information from one place to another, but to help manage the supply chain, if you will, if that's the right word for healthcare, but to manage that capacity coming into the hospitals. Where should they go? No longer just go to this local hospital. It's, if you're not critical, we need to bring you to another hospital so that we can manage the levels appropriately. We're going to see advanced treatments. You're seeing right now different models and different techniques that are used to build treatments. We're seeing all this discussion of control trials. Those control trials are going to change. We're going to look for advanced mathematics to help us figure out how to do those treatments, how to do those control trials a lot faster. We don't want to wait 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We need to know much sooner than that. Simulations will help that as well. Also, one of the things that we learned from this COVID crisis was a lot of the notes that people wrote started to have a large degree of relevance. For example, the patients in the UK or France started to acknowledge that they lost the sense of smell and the sense of taste. But there's no code for that. These were in notes that someone analyzed. We need to do a better job of analyzing the unstructured data so that we can get that information out faster to notice where some of these patterns occur. In retail, again, we've talked about customer traffic, managing the flow of customers in retail stores, automatic replenishment, AI delivery using drones and stuff to drones or even gig purchasing like the Uber to actually deliver products. The virtual reality experience, enable customers to experience products prior to purchase. Engage them more before they contact you in the store. So we'll see more of that too. We can see that with cars, and we can see that in other areas as well. But also enhanced customer service and targeting, staying connected to the customer. You're losing that contact. Staying connected to the customer is critical. And as such, we want to make sure that we have our AI tools to help us do that. Doesn't mean automatically have a chatbot reach out, but it may mean that your AI system has said, we should contact this customer because I think they're going to purchase something based on their habits. This should not be just left to an Amazons of the world. This should be available to a lot of other retailers. The technology will expand tremendously. Again, we talked about Long Island and New York City being a technological hub. We're going to increase the data requirements. New solutions are needed to help collect and analyze the data. These shared repositories will become more prevalent. We need to augment our existing services, so they're going to seek AI solutions to help them provide a competitive advantage over other areas. If you're not open and your competitor is open somewhere in a different region, that's going to affect your bottom line. And these AI solutions can help try and figure out how we can get the product, or where we should display, where we should actually have product, so that we can get it out to our customers, so we minimize the impact. Predict outages. So the managed services providers in the area could have a very big effect to predict if we're seeing increased traffic in certain areas or slowdowns. They could provide insights into changes in activity. If we're seeing network bandwidth drop or network bandwidth increase, if they're sharing that information, it could be indication of something going on with regards to fear or customers talking about things. It could also be used as a prediction for a cyber attack. These new solutions that are going to be held by technical companies will represent great opportunities for new products, being able to integrate that data. But we also need to increase our partnerships across. Not every company has all the skills needed, both in a localized knowledge as well as a technical knowledge. So they got to share this, they have to share in many ways some types of technology and share their insights so that they can better be able to predict the next pandemic. So in manufacturing, we strongly think companies should start investing in simulations for many things, including work traffic patterns and logistics. How to minimize those touches, how to maximize efficiency through the workplace. Develop new products, figure out what new products are needed based on this and how. The direct delivery, thank you, Jeff. Jeff just put a comment in there. Thank you very much. Direct delivery. AI algorithms can help manage supply chain, which is absolutely critical. We talked about the supply chain. And again, automating the warehouses so that you can minimize the contact for your workforce, so that they are actually they're no longer needed to actually interact directly if there is a pandemic, but they can actually use these AI technologies to deliver the products to them, and then they can be packaged or delivered and so forth. So the entire workforce will be changed, not eliminated. These are complementary. So the recommendations for any company here, especially on Long Island and New York, is this: collect more data and more and more. That's the first one. You need to be very proactive to pull in the data. Every company right now, in our opinion, should be taking the COVID data and using it within their models right now to see what's happening for short-term models, to see the behaviors of customers, to see what's changed, to see how at various county levels it affected their shopping. Did it increase? Did it decrease? Reevaluate or modify your data repositories. So the complexity of new data requires reevaluation. You're going to be pulling in more data, more unstructured data. These data lakes will become very important. And all of that needs to be put in, and you need to reevaluate how you're going to store it. It's no longer, well, we think we'll need it, maybe we need it, we're not sure. No, you need it. You're going to need these things if you want to react to the next crisis. You're going to need to develop a data analytics strategy. A near term, for example, for COVID, model individual regions, localities, and possible closures. In the medium term, model changes in customer behavior as well. See how they change. You know, we've talked to a couple of companies that we've worked with in the past, and they saw their revenue dip completely. So the next question is, when will it come back? How do we know? Those could be modeled. Those could be simulated so that you have an idea of what to do and how to prepare for it. In the longer term, you're going to identify changing trends and predictions. That's one of the key things, because you want to see how these trends change. You want to predict what happens and simulate another pandemic. What might happen, where, and how. The fourth one is use more touch point data services. But this does not mean touch as in physical touch. It means, how can I engage to understand what my customer or employee or the product is doing? Collect more internal data points. That may mean using RFID, using the mobile devices or other things, you know, to literally track where things are going. Not to be the big brother, but to understand what's happening. Use IoT to collect the information. So the IoT is going to be huge, right? I'll get to that question in 1 second as soon as I finish the slide. So the IoT to collect that information is critical. I can put IoT in refrigerators. I can figure out what's from a particular refrigerator, what do I need? What am I short on? What do I want to buy? What can I have automatically delivered? Is my water level low? Do I have which customers or how many customers are coming in? Where's my product? We gather also data from ancillary related services. So even though you're in retail, you might, if you're a larger retailer, you might want to pull data from healthcare and finance just to understand what the changes are in that area so that you can use it in your model. And the fifth one, as I mentioned before, use simulations to help risk plans and mitigation efforts. Provide insight into various uncertain scenarios, including area shutdowns. What if Nassau and Suffolk had to close, but New York City didn't? What if downstate has to close again, but the rest of the country doesn't? What would you do then? How would you do that? What is the probability that that will occur? The simulations can provide insight into various scenarios to know how long you'll have to operate before a shutdown and how quickly it might take to come back. You can also create optimization models combined with your simulation to enhance supply chain logistics issues. Can you manage your supply chain? And are you too reliant on one particular supply chain, like say directly from China or through a country that might get closed? How do I manage that? And what levels do I need to manage in order to have that and maintain profitability? So a question out there was, how will we know that the models are accurate since so many have not been? And that gets to the point that I made before. It is imperative that the data scientists convey what they used in their models accurately. The notion that we can just produce a model and just say, well, here's my range of 100,000 plus 100,000 minus. That's way too much. That's way too much. We need to be very, very specific on how we approach our models. What data went in? What are the pitfalls? And we need to explain why we think we're going to be accurate at this level. Statisticians have a very bad tendency of just creating these wide ranges and say it could be up here, it could be down here. We can't do that anymore. We need to know that for our sake, from a data science perspective, there is a wide range. But you cannot make decisions on closing a country or closing an economy because we think that the range is going to be completely off. Now, in this case, I want to say that there was not a lot of information out there about what the number of deaths would be and so forth. And everybody had to make a best guess. There is no fault, going anywhere. So that's a critical piece. So I think there's another question from Bob. Someone asked about our areas of expertise. We're a data science firm, and we build AI products and services for companies. So we have certain things that we do. We've got our models for our COVID-19, data points. We've made certain predictions and so forth. So that kind of concludes the presentation. Barbara, did you want to add anything to this?
I just want to thank you, Alex. This was just tremendous, and it just really answered a lot of questions that we've had, and I think it's kind of reassuring that AI can be used in so many ways to really help us in this situation and to move forward, and it seems like it could create a lot of new opportunities. I really like what you said, that Long Island, New York City could really be the epicenter of change, and I think that is just so positive, and and that the social distancing can really create new customer demands for services. I think it was very positive. I know that I have been sending a few questions, but I just wonder, are government authorities, is this what's going to be happening, or is it going to be haphazard that some businesses will use AI? Will the government be pushing AI so that we all can take advantage of this and things are done in the right way? Or is it just going to be those companies that can really afford to pay for personalized AI?
I think the answer to that is, and there's a question out there on education. So I'll get to that in 1 second, but yes, it's expensive, but that's where that collaboration and coordination occur. If companies get together, right, and they say, you know what, we need a solution because we need to protect our industry, or we need to protect our local community. We may be competitors, but you know what, at the end of the day, if we all go down, nobody has anything. So
Exactly.
sharing that resource and sharing each other resource is huge to that. Now, the question out there was, I didn't discuss education. I apologize. I did want to discuss education. So I want to give you an example of one of the things that we've done. We actually worked with a local school here in Merrick who did not have any type of learning management system. I think it was March 13th, was the day that it was announced that the next week they were going to shut down. Within 72 hours, myself and my team set up that school with a learning management system. We taught them how to use Zoom. We got every student engaged. We trained the teachers, and we basically helped them create videos. And they've been doing it week over week over week over week. What we have seen, and we've been collecting data from the teachers, and we collected some data from the parents as part of a research project. What we've understood is that you cannot operate a school on the same schedule that you would operate it online. There are different paradigms. One of the great things that Lehigh actually did, my son goes to Lehigh and I thought it's fantastic. They actually, on a Wednesday, they created Wellness Wednesday to give people and parents a break. And this situation has created such stress for the parents who are trying to work and who are trying to teach their kids and get their kids online, that they needed to do that. And it was a fantastic idea. The local school here in Merrick, we were told, you can't do, in other research, that you can't do kindergarten, or first grade online. Well, that school has broken that model, and they have been absolutely successful at the low-level kindergarten, first grade, all through. What it means is there's an opportunity to do that. And it's going to be imperative that schools look at the technology that they have, understand the skill set of their folks. You need a technical person available to work with you, and you have to develop a strategy. There will be no more snow days. You do not need a snow day if you do this. Plus, if you're using a learning management system, think about the data that you're collecting for the student. And you can use these algorithms to predict when a student might be falling behind or something else happening at home. That might be a clear indication, a better indication than a teacher waiting a few weeks to put their grades in. You get instant feedback. So, to the person who asked the question, hopefully that I answered that well. There's another question. Can you apply data collection in AI to the education? Yes, so that's kind of goes in line with that. We can use that data collection to understand how our students are doing, what interaction, when they interact, what times they want to interact, and how we can change the education system completely. So what I mentioned to Bob earlier was the content creators are the educators, but we need to be able to give them the content on the device they want, on the device they want, in the format that they want, at the time of their choosing, to make it as simplified for them as possible. And we think that's one of this 360-degree view of education we think is going to be a big thing in the next couple of years. Are there any specific AI models that you're using, deep learning, reinforcement learning? So yeah, we use deep learning, we use feed-forward neural networks, support vector machines, everything. The one thing I would just challenge on any specific techniques or models, there is no model that is a magic bullet. We look at models as like we're a detective, a data detective, where what we do is we will use different methods to tell us what the data wants to tell us. We try not to impart any bias. What we believe is in the yin-yang of analytics, that one portion is the mathematics, which is the objective, and the other portion is the subjective. Because sometimes you don't have direct data points, so you have to use your intuition to help drive what data you're going to need. That Nassau County map, just to give you an idea, when we saw the New York City map, we immediately had an idea of why was this expanding. Obviously, the trains might be a big thing. We looked at San Francisco. At one point, San Francisco was much higher in infection rates than Los Angeles was. Why? They have a more widely used transportation system, a public transportation system, and it's not unreasonable that when we looked at Louisiana, we looked at Detroit, the cluster of areas that had the problem seemed to be centered around these transportation lines. And when we looked at Nassau, and I live in Nassau, so it's a little bit easier, we saw that streak right across Hempstead Turnpike. If you looked at the early days of this crisis in the first week, last week of March, first week of April, it was right along, or the week before actually, was right along that Hempstead Turnpike line. And it became a clear indication that it was that line that was causing the problem, that caused a bigger problem, and then it just blew up from there. And so those charts tell you. So that's why we use a number of different AI models, deep learning models and so forth. But again, we're not bound to any one particular, nor are we bound to any particular language or anything like that. Does that answer? Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Any other questions?
I know that a few people have asked whether or not we could have access to your slides and maybe the presentation. Maybe we could post it online at the SIG. I know we have a place on the website for the data analytics SIG. And actually, if anyone is interested in getting involved in the data analytics SIG, if you go to our website, NYMetroACM.org, you'd be able to interface, sign up for the committee, ask questions to Alex, etc. Or of course, you could always email me. You get the emails from our chapter and I can forward them to the data analytics SIG. But I think this was just a phenomenal presentation and just so pertinent and something that we really needed. Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to more presentations from the data analytics SIG.
Great.
Thank
I'll
you.
give this over to you, Barbara, the presentation, so you can make it available.
Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay,
Stay
thanks.
tuned for our next webinar.
Have a great day.
Bye.